really, we have a special guest here today.
Okay.
It is a local boy, but Glenn Gary is going to do the introduction. And Glenn, I would think you should run that whole thing, including, I'm assuming we'll have a Q&A. This gang always has questions, right?
Yeah.
So listen up, folks. This is a bit of a surprise for me too, not the guest, but the content for this event. Looking forward to it, Glenn.
All right, everybody. So Markham Hislop is a guy I've been kind of following for a little over a year. And he is, I'm going to describe him as this. He won't describe himself as this, but I'll describe him as the David Suzuki of energy. He gets to go out and talk to a lot of really interesting people in science, in the energy system, in politics. He has access to people that truly makes me wonder just how much dirt he has on a lot of people. But he gets the access, he gets all the great questions. So you can see this, Energi.Media. This is Markham's team's, their website. Thoughtful journalism about energy's future. He also has, you'll see him a lot on YouTube, these shorter talks here. And he also has a podcast available at your favorite podcasting app, all Energi.Media with an I. He's a very busy guy. So what we're going to do here, we're going to kind of turn the table. He's normally doing the interviews and doing a very erudite job of it, I might add. So today I'm going to really hack this, but I'll try and do an interview and try and keep him between the rails. We'll do the interview and then we'll open it up for some questions. One question, one follow-up. Okay, don't hog the special person. Okay, so we'll kick off and welcome Markham to our association. And can you give us a little bit of your background, like what you studied in university and stuff?
Well, thanks, Glenn, and thank you very much for having me. And by the way, I'm in Parksville, so Larry and Nanaimo, stick your hand out the window and we'll wave at each other. Well, I'll give you my background. I mean, I went to university in Saskatoon, University of Saskatchewan, and I see a fair amount of gray hair in the audience, so you'll understand when I started in '79, something like that. So it kind of dates me a little bit. I did a graduate degree there, and I did my master's thesis on the transition from horse-drawn technology to power farming, 1900 to 1930. And I had to read all the literature, the whole business of innovators and early adopters. That comes from a guy named Rogers, who's an early academic who was early in this technology adoption literature. And lo and behold, as I got into journalism in the late 80s and then throughout my career, that work on my thesis comes back over and over again as being relevant. And particularly because we do kind of energy journalism, energy transition journalism, which basically means kind of the response of the hydrocarbon sector, the oil and gas and pipelines, to the rise of clean energy and clean technology. So it's adaptation. And then, of course, the rise of clean energy and clean technology. So we cover a lot of ground. But the theoretical framework that I developed back in my thesis is as relevant today as it was back in the mid 80s, and particularly around the energy transition, which, electric vehicles and batteries are just a key part of that. And the parallels between, I'll just give you the Cole's notes. Energy transitions take anywhere, 50-ish years. And the last one, which was from steam and horses to the internal combustion engine and cheap petroleum, started in the late 19th century. And generally the third decade is the disruptive decade where the technology climbs up on the hockey stick, the shaft of the hockey stick, and then really begins to push the older technology out of the marketplace. Well, that happened in the 1920s, and then the 1930s and 40s were kind of a mop up, and by late 40s, you couldn't find a horse in a field anywhere in Western Canada. So, and the parallels with our current energy transition are just eerie. I mean, in the early 19, late 19th century, sorry, 20th century, 1990s, that's what I'm trying to spit out. You see solar panels and wind turbines and the first real commercial electric vehicles. And then you've got 20-ish years where that technology gets better and better and cheaper. And now here we are in the 2020s, and this is the disruptive decade of our energy transition. You're going to see, this is the decade where wind and solar push everything out of, coal is dying, natural gas is next. Electric vehicles are going to start displacing internal combustion engine cars, all of it. This is the decade. You and I, all of us here are going to look back, at least I hope you all make it to 2030. Hope I do too. But anyway, we're going to look back from 2030 on 2020 and go, oh my, I can't believe how much things have changed.
So Energi.Media, you are looking to start conversations with all sorts of different people, to also frame new narratives for how energy goes forward. That's something you talk a lot about. And you've had some amazing access to people I alluded to before. Can you list off a few of the people you've interviewed?
Well, yeah, and I want to start, before I do, let me start by saying that I'm not an expert, and I will bet everybody in this Zoom meeting knows a heck of a lot more about electric vehicle technical specs and so on than I do. Trust me, you're all far more expert about that than I am. What I do is interview experts for a living. And, most of my experts have PhDs, or they're, EV analysts or some, economists, something like that. And so I did, you do 400 or 500 of those in a year, and you kind of, you pick stuff up. But more importantly, it's connecting the dots. When you're a mile wide and an inch thick, you see a lot of territory, and then you start to connect the dots, and the trends become apparent. And that, I think, is what I bring to the conversation today. And generally in Canada, is I do energy and climate reporting in Canada, the United States, in Europe, and Asia. And after a while, you begin to say, aha, okay, now I'm beginning to see, and especially when you get out of Canada, this is really interesting. I hate to say it, folks, because I'm a very, I love being Canadian. We're a little inward looking. We really are a little provincial when compared to the Americans or the Europeans. And never mind, don't get me started on Albertans. We got any Albertans in the audience? Okay, well, we'll grist for another conversation. But anyway, and that's why I started the podcast, Energy Talks, is because originally it was, we were not going to have any Canadian experts on it at all. It was all about bringing new ideas into the country, not about talking, more talking heads from Ontario or UBC or Simon Fraser. And so who have I talked to? Well, I've got a list here of just in the last 2 weeks, EV related. So Tony Seba, the futurist from Stanford in California. Dirk Uwe Sauer, who's a professor of battery science in Aachen University in Germany. Joanna Kariasis, based in Vancouver. She's an EV analyst for Clean Energy Canada. Sam Abul-Samid, who is the Guidehouse Insights EV analyst based out of Detroit. Colin McCarricker, actually is a bit of a feather in my cap. That's Bloomberg New Energy Finance's head of transportation analysis.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That's when you see, EV estimates, everybody comes back to Bloomberg NEF, and that means you're coming back to Colin, and Colin grew up on Quadra Island, just an FYI, so good BC boy. And then his colleague, James Frith, who's the head of Bloomberg NEF's energy storage, and again, when it comes to batteries, BNEF is the gold standard in forecasting. Ram Chandrasekaran, who is Wood Mackenzie's head of electric transportation and mobility. Jeff Turner from Dunsky Energy in Montreal, who's an EV analyst here in Canada. Josipa Petrunik, who is on the transit side for Qtric in Canada. Who else we got? Barbara Finnemore, who is a Natural Resource Defense Council and a China expert talking about the arms race. Nat Blair, here's a guy that runs for the National Renewable Energy Lab of the US government. And he heads up their battery research. And that's just a short list from the, like the last 2 weeks. And the reason I get these is because when you do enough of them, people can go and check out your work. Like your entree into these organizations and companies is always the media people. And the comms people go and check you out. They want to see, are you a journalist or aren't you a journalist? And it's kind of like pornography. When you see it, you know it. And these are all former journalists, and they understand. They'll look at Ezra Levant and Rebel Media and go, no, I don't think so. But if you're credible and you're doing a good, credible work, they get you in. And then once you've got in the door, that's your opportunity then to do good, solid journalism. And after a while, you can just email people and they're happy to do an interview. And I do the kind of longer form interviews. So Glenn was mentioning YouTube. Those are 7 to 10 Zoom video, just like this, where I interview experts, and they're kind of like breaking stories. But instead of a minute and a half soundbite on CBC, you get 7 or 10 or 12 minutes of an expert kind of getting into it in a little more in depth. And the experts, of course, they love that because they hate sound bites. They always want to say more. And then the podcast is 20 to 40 minutes, and it's kind of longer form journalism where you really want to get into the nitty gritty, the nuts and bolts of things with the expert. And then I write columns, like Markham on Energy, where I'm just muckraking and annoying Jason Kenney. I do that on it. Oh, and in fairness, I'm getting under Horgan's skin a little bit too, and Doug Ford. So, because I'm an old print reporter, I still enjoy writing. So
yeah, and all those are terrific. I mean, I kind of bounce a lot of what you do off of some of the other reading I do around the planet, and a lot of it makes sense. You're also very good. You're interviewing somebody to let them say what they have to say, even when they clearly maybe don't understand where things are going, and that they're already well astern of where it is, or behind the puck. The puck, they don't even know where the puck is, let alone where it's going. So no, you've been very good at letting people, especially politicians, say their piece. So yeah, no, that's terrific. Now let's talk about your impressions about what's happening with EVs in British Columbia. The uptake of them, where you see policy going. Currently, the current government in power has taken the path of all carrots, no stick. So, what do you think about those sort of things?
Well, let's start at the macro level. So, and I'll go back a few years. When I was doing electric vehicle and battery stuff, 2016, 2017, I had a couple of EV analysts down in the US, one in Boston and another one, I forget where they were. Anyway, and 3 or 4 battery scientists. And I would call them up every once in a while and we'd talk about the latest trends and where things were at. And if I could summarize the battery research at that time, they were saying, look, between here now and 2030, lithium ion is going to dominate. The prices are going to drop 50%, and the energy density is going to go up 50%. And then, around 2030, we'll have another chemistry like lithium metal anodes, or we'll have, solid state or something like that. And then EV adoption is really going to take off in the 2030s. And then about in the 2018-ish, around, all of a sudden, everything started to accelerate. It was crazy. All of a sudden, prices were dropping and battery factories were going up, and and big companies were announcing that they were getting on the EV train, so to speak. And it's been nothing but accelerating since then. And I've asked a number of experts, why is that? And the common answer is because these companies, battery companies, automakers, all sorts of others, threw billions, tens of billions at engineers. Got any engineers in the group? Because that's
number of retired ones.
yeah, I mean, look, you get enough engineers on a problem, and the clever buggers are going to figure out a solution to it, right?
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. When Tesla had its battery day late last year, one of the stories that sticks in my mind I interviewed Dr. Kai Philip Carries, who's the head of a German battery company. And he said, look, when you wet coat the anode, half your freaking factory, your battery factory, goes to having anodes laying around drying. So now Tesla's going to move to dry coating anodes. You just shuffle them off to the warehouse or wherever they're going, and they're done. They don't have. So now you've freed up some huge big percentage of your factory to doing other things, and that lowers your per unit costs, and it's all because of clever engineering. So the trend that started, sort of in the early part of the the tens, when they were doing this, and then started showing benefits in the, around that 2017, 2018, all of that has got momentum. Like it's a freight train. You can't stop it. It's a freight train going downhill. It is technological change and engineering improvements to that technology that is driving the energy transition first and foremost. Now, there's lots of other things, like capital is absolutely flooding into clean energy and clean tech all around the world. It feels, you got everybody that I can see on my screen here is old enough to remember the dot-com boom in the 1990s, and it feels like that on steroids. Like, it's crazy. So, and then there's policy, and then there's changing consumer preferences. All of this is coming together in a perfect virtuous circle to accelerate the adoption of all of this technology. And so we do very little hydrocarbon journal reporting anymore. I mean, I got tired of beating Jason Kenney around the ears with the evidence stick. It's just I couldn't do it anymore. There's so much going on in the world, inside Canada and outside Canada, that we probably do 95% of our stuff now is clean energy and clean technology. And so I sit in my home office in Parksville and interview people literally around the world on Zoom, and it's a good gig.
Yeah, it's good work if you can get it. That's for sure. Yeah, when you talk policy, BC, when back in late 2018, they announced we were going to do an electric or zero emission vehicle standard was going to come up.
Right.
And then they announced it, and they worked through the next 6 or 7 months to publish it, and then another 6 or 7 months before regulations came out. That all looked really, really ambitious and pushing things forward. Fast forward a couple more years, that's looking kind of slow considering a lot of the other announcements that are happening around the world.
You in your previous question, you asked me about BC and where we're at here, and I kind of got off my own little tangent, forgot to answer it. So thanks for bringing me back around. The Oregon government is an interesting beast because it is fairly progressive, and it gets the energy transition, it gets climate change, and it's brought in Clean BC, it's announced any number of initiatives under Clean BC, of which zero emission vehicles are one. And I should add that it's not just passenger vehicles. I mean, they're one of the few provincial governments in Canada that gets that medium duty and heavy duty commercial vehicles are a huge market. I mean, they're a huge source of greenhouse gas emissions, but they're also there's huge demand for them. So garbage trucks and delivery vans and all that kind of stuff. And the automakers are focused mostly on the light duty part of the market. And so if there's any opportunity in the marketplace to carve out another niche, it's in medium and heavy duty. And you've only got. So So anyway, so they've done some good things, as you say. The problem is they keep getting overrun by reality. You know, the market and the technology is simply moving faster than governments are. Now, they're in good stead. I mean, they could be Alberta or Ontario, which are way behind. Saskatchewan, Manitoba. I mean, you know, so Quebec and BC are leading, but they're nowhere near where, say, California is. They're not even as far as Texas in many respects. So I think what we're going to see in the next little while, I'll just wrap this up, Glenn, is the federal government is going to drive a lot of this policy because they set the backstop standards, and then the provinces have to have an equivalent, or the federal government steps in. And I think you'll see, because Horgan and Trudeau have a good working relationship and they want this, I think you'll see them pull up their socks a little bit going forward.
Yeah, definitely. It's some of the semi announcements coming out of Ottawa right now are definitely all going in the right direction. They seem to be a bit slow compared to some of the other jurisdictions around the planet, but you kind of get the feeling that the current government in Ottawa doesn't want to lean too far forward lest it cause unhappiness here at home. So they're couching things very carefully. Let's talk about it.
Can I address that just for a second?
Oh, sure.
You raise an interesting point. So I interviewed Barbara Finnemore. I mentioned her earlier, and she's a China expert, and she wrote a piece for Oxford Energy Institute about the competition between the US and China on clean energy and clean technology. And there is literally a Cold War style arms race between Asia, led by China, and Europe and North and the US for dominance around these technologies, and batteries like right at the top of it, electric vehicles of all sorts right at the top of that list. And so that begs the question, where does Canada come in? Like, you know, what's our niche here? Well, you can see in the last 6 to 12 months, Trudeau and others are trying to define what that niche is. So critical minerals, that's got a lot of attention lately. Batteries, you saw just last week, there was an announcement about $160 million for a Lion Electric battery plant. And you're seeing money going into research. And with the election of Joe Biden, this is the big, if you go read Joe Biden's climate plan. Yes. It says we fell behind China under Trump, and by God, by 2030, we're going to be back number one in the world on clean energy and clean technology. And so what does the US do? It looks north to its buddy Canada and says, what you got? What do you got? We need your minerals. We need what do you got for batteries? What do you got? So what you're going to see over the next little while is Canada and the US negotiating where Canada sits in the American supply chain. That's really what it's not too much different in many ways than what we did with hydrocarbons, not oil and gas. We have a very continental hydrocarbon system of production and transportation, and that got negotiated over decades. Yeah. And so you'll see something similar to that. That's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, no, the energy security will come to the non-hydrocarbon equation. Yeah. Let's roll into energy in British Columbia. We've been very fortunate. Decisions were made back in the 50s and 60s with regards to building a crown corporation, BC Hydro, huge fleet of dams, and that was really meant so that people of BC and industry in BC would have cheap electricity going into the future. And every government since then has benefited from that. We have the least expensive or the second least expensive, I think, in North America. So it's pretty good. But we're now seeing there's the last two governments we'd had in power have made some interesting decisions with regards to continuing to build a hydroelectric fleet that may not pan out. What do you think about where we've been and where we need to go?
Good question, Glenn. And again, let's go back to the global scenario. So I've been interviewing experts about the evolution of the electricity systems, and in particular in the United States and in Canada. And that system and utility business model is being transformed by technology. And some of it is distributed energy. So, you saw a report come out 2 weeks ago where the independent operator in Alberta, they went through a consultation process over the last couple of years, and then they issued a report. And I can boil it down to you. We're worried about losing our commercial customers to generate their own electricity. They're going to build their own wind turbines and build their own solar plants and put in their own batteries, and we're going to lose them off the grid. And then what are we going to do? So that is a microcosm of what's going on all over the world. Those technologies are forcing utilities to reimagine how they do this, and every jurisdiction is different. This is really important. BC is not California, and Alberta is not Texas, and there are 50 states in the U.S. and all sorts of markets and independent and state regulators and on and on and on. And the same thing in Canada. I mean, we have historically in Canada, we've had vertically integrated monopolies, often around hydro. And then we have two exceptions. We have the Alberta system, which is very much a regulated market system. And then you have Ontario, which is just a bastardized hybrid that nobody knows what to call it. And then the rest of them are all of these like BC Hydro. That's what they look like. Yeah. So here's the problem that BC has got. The economy is electrifying. The future is electric. That's going to be the title of my next book. The future, the energy future is electric. And BC Hydro has been set up. That's not their mandate, right? Like there's no competition. There's no, well, it's not for us, but you know what I mean? This is not a market-based system here in BC. So here's all this technology completely changing the industry, and you've got stolid old BC Hydro, doing its thing, and it got raped and pillaged by the Liberals, and now it's, got an 82 to 18 debt equity ratio, the highest in North America. So it's in financial trouble. It's got Site C that's just imploding, and it looks like the levelized cost of energy is going to be like 140 bucks a megawatt hour. I mean, it ain't great. And then you've got the Horgan government that's committed to public ownership. Like nobody wants to talk about opening it up like Alberta or markets or no. The only thing we're going to do is we're going to sell electricity to other markets. Don't talk to us about letting generators in.
Yeah, with what's happened in Texas and Ontario and a bit of Alberta, deregulation will be definitely off the table. But definitely the BC Hydro needs to take that last word and turn that into energy. Maybe. What do you think?
Well, hang on a second. There is a wild card in this deck. So if you read any climate policy that has any teeth to it, it relies on electrification very heavily. So there have been some preliminary studies about how much extra power is needed to electrify the buildings, transportation, and industry in order to meet clean BC targets. And it's gobsmackingly big. It's a big number. And Heyman and Mungal, when they were the ministers in charge, are on the record publicly as saying that by 2030, BC needs the equivalent of 5 more Site Cs. Like that's literally 5,000 megawatts of generating capacity, and we've only got 12 plus right now. I mean, that's how much more we need. And then there are also these other studies, are big numbers around what happens if you, completely electrify LNG. There's a whole bunch of variables, but this is the heart of BC's problem. If it proceeds with electrification, where the hell is it going to get the electricity? Because BC Hydro is not building another dam after Site C, and that, if you're so, and it doesn't do wind and solar. So it's not like there's going to be a big wind and solar build out in BC from the utility. And what's his name? Ralston says, "Oh, well, don't worry about it. We'll get it from cheap solar from California." Well, I interviewed a bunch of American economists about that, and they go, "Really? But he's saying that? No, that's a terrible idea, because they haven't got the transmission capacity, and
Right.
because whatever surplus there is, you've already got investors looking at, well, hey, if you're selling solar at half a cent a kilowatt hour, I want in. I'm going to build a green hydrogen plant. I'm going to install a bunch of electrolyzers, and I'm going to make cheap green hydrogen." So that plan is got all kinds of holes in it. So this is, and getting back to your point about narrative, Glenn, we're not talking about this. There is no conversation in BC to talk about what kind of a system, an electricity system we need to take on these new challenges, policy challenges, economic challenges, all of that. And we desperately need to have one. We've got to figure this out.
Well, you're entirely correct, because there are middle-class people out there who are putting in enough solar that they can run their homes, their electric vehicles for zero from the grid over the entire year. And there's no distribution, right? So what happens if there are 900,000 single-family homes in British Columbia? That's how it happens if half of them do that. What happens to BC Hydro's moneymakers?
There's all kinds of questions like that, and we don't have a lot of answers. There's a lot of unknowns right now, but we do know the general trends, and we do know the general issues. But because BC Hydro has dominated the electricity industry so much over the last 60 years, these conversations are taking place behind closed doors, and they're taking place with the usual suspects. And there isn't a whole lot of innovation or original thought going into this. It's just, well, how do we do more of the same but get different outcomes? So I've done a lot of work, and I'm writing a series of pieces now about BC Hydro and the need to get a different narrative. Like, we need to open up the conversation, have a frank discussion about what the alternatives are and what they're going to cost, and then make some decisions around how we proceed with BC Hydro, because it's still going to be a big player in this regardless. So the 2020s, next few years are going to see a lot of changes around hydro, or they're not, and that's going to set up problems, a decade down the road.
Yeah, too true. I'm going to give you your opportunity to answer a question I didn't ask, and then we'll go to we'll get some questions from the audience.
Yeah, sure. Fire away.
No, this
what?
Is your chance.
Oh, I got it.
What? Yeah.
Sorry, I misunderstood. A question you didn't ask, but I'd like to. Let's continue the conversation around narrative. In Ottawa, I have to say, this is not a partisan thing. But my experts tell me this, so I'm repeating them. The Trudeau government over the last 6 years has done a pretty good job of lining itself up, building the energy and climate policy framework to lead us forward into the 2020s. There's lots of things that need, fine tuning and better regulations and discussions with the provinces. And this is not a done deal, but the basic regulatory and policy framework is pretty good. The problem is that Canada has the same problem that BC has. All these changes are taking place, and we're not having the conversation. We're not having the discussion. Like, remember what happened with, we saw Texas 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the conversation that started in the US. We saw California, in the summer, and with all the brownouts, blackouts, and the wildfires, and all the conversation that started within the state and nationally. I mean, there's a huge debate going on down there, and we do nothing. And we need to what the narrative does, what the conversation does, is set the parameters for what's possible in politics, right? So if you look at what happened with Rachel Notley in Ottawa, my experts, in Alberta, my experts say that the climate leadership plan she introduced in 2015 was really good policy. And that's why the oil sands CEO supported her at that time. Then you had a political revolt that Jason Kenney led, and now all of that's been shut down. Most of the policy has been canceled, and it's a completely different approach out of Alberta. And that's what the national energy conversation very often is about, whether Alberta's pissed off or not.
Yeah.
We're annoyed about carbon tax. We're going to take you to court. Oh, you didn't fight hard enough for Keystone XL. That dominates the conversation in Canada around energy. And it's the completely wrong conversation to have. The conversation should be, how do we, going forward, we know the global energy system is being transformed. That is a given. It's only a question of timing now. Is it going to happen quickly or moderately quickly, or that's what we're waiting to see. So if that's happening, there's two broad things you have to do. One of them is mitigate risk, right? I mean, change brings with it risk, and you have to have policies in place to help your economy mitigate those risks so that we're not negatively affected and destroy wealth and jobs and all of that. The other thing is to seize opportunities. Now, BC has done actually not a bad job of seizing opportunities. We're seeing the clean tech industry is growing, and we're seeing a little bit of early activity around batteries and EVs and stuff. So BC is okay at this point, but nationally we are not, and we need to have that conversation and grapple with it so that people, and I don't mean education, I don't mean energy literacy or any of that kind of stuff. We need themes in the narrative, and we need to tell stories to amplify and support that narrative. And then that raises the bar, that opens up the conversation that the politicians can have about policy and about what we're willing to do and what we're not willing to do. And so I would have to say, the question you didn't ask, you sort of asked it, but I didn't get a chance to pontificate about it, is that conversation. Provincially, those conversations need to take place, and nationally, the conversation needs to take place in a very different way than it is now.
Right on. Yeah, a lot of what we do our advocacy at all levels of government, and we also advocate to our neighbors and on social media. This is a fairly swept up bunch when it comes to a lot of that, and you're discussing BC Hydro is part of the conversation. We do need to get on with that. Okay, I'm going to move on to, we have a few questions here. And so Don Scott was wondering if you had talked to MIT professor Sadoway about his Ambry liquid metal batteries for grid level storage.
No, but let me tell you about those kinds of stories. I literally could do one of those interviews every day about innovations that are coming out of various labs. The Americans are like, they lead the innovation parade by miles. And it comes out of their university labs that's often paid for by Department of Energy money. It comes out of their big, they have 17 labs, government-owned labs, and a lot of it comes out of that. They innovate like crazy. And there's all sorts of electrochemistries that are being developed and different designs for anodes and cathodes and the solid state. So I made a decision after doing a few of those stories and kind of figuring out where this was all going, that I could be chasing, battery breakthrough stories for the rest of my career. I kind of made a decision to pull back on that and not do it, and wait to see what came out of the lab, and then got into the development process. And I should mention, Professor Zauer is really good at this. So he was talking about, you've heard a lot of talk about solid state batteries. Toyota's going to have one in 2025 and all of this stuff. And he said, well, yeah, but if they were going to do that, we'd have, batteries on our test benches already. and we don't have batteries in our test benches. He said, so I'm a little skeptical that the rhetoric is the hype has got ahead of, where we're really at. And so he said, we're going to have them, but they might be late 2020s or maybe 2030. So there is a long way from what gets done in the lab, the breakthroughs in the lab, till they get actually, put into a battery and are used commercially. And there's lots of it. And so.
Yeah, we can all know from the early days of EVs, there were hockey socks of companies all had all these wonderful ideas that you don't even remember their names anymore, like A123 and a couple others like that. Ballard. Anyway, sorry. Sorry.
Keep shot.
Yeah, I'll move on to another question. Well answered. Oh dear. Yeah, somebody asked the question. What does it take to build a robust electrical grid? Do you want to handle that one?
I do actually, because I've interviewed, in fact, you can go and on our Energy Talks podcast, I interviewed, it was not the last one, but the one before that, I interviewed Val Jensen, who's an American utility veteran, and he does consulting now for one of the big consulting houses. And he wrote a piece on the future, the utility of the future. And basically where it's going is, instead of a grid, you're going to have like a platform. And I'll just back up a little bit, because I first got introduced to this in 2017 with NMAX in Calgary, of all places. So I was talking to their planner, and he was saying, remember back in, like the 1980s, and all we had for phones was a landline and a fax line. Remember that? And then along came the 1990s, and with the internet boom, also was all of the, we put in the fiber optics, and then we had big pipes, and then we could do all sorts of other cool things and cells, blah, 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 blah. The technology became a web. The telecom networks became webs, and you could do all sorts of, data flowing this way and that way between users and the industry the telecom provider. And so the NMAX guy said, that's where we're going with electricity. So the utilities will be building these platforms where everybody can be they can be a producer, they can be a consumer, they can sell services, they can sell electricity, and it can all just go back and forth like this, and it'll all be controlled with software and AI and all this groovy technology that I know nothing about. And I interviewed a guy from the Watt Coalition, whose name I can't remember, an engineer. They had put out a study, and he said about grid enhancing technologies. There are 3 technologies that you could literally double the amount of renewables in the system with those three technologies. There's piles of this stuff coming. And so we don't know exactly what those platforms are going to look like. So they'll look like different around the country, both in the US and Canada, but that's generally the direction we're going. And it will really change. And this is why I say, if that's the direction the industry is going, DC Hydro, vertically integrated monopoly, maybe not the 21st century utility that we need to keep up with everybody. Or maybe it is, and we modify it somehow, but that's why we need to have the conversation. So I'm sorry, did I answer your question, Glenn?
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to do 2 more questions, and I'll leave the most controversial to the last.
Good idea.
We have a question here from Ted, and he's talking about who should be leading the energy transformation. Should it be federal government? Should it be the Institute for Climate Choices? Should it be Clean Energy Canada? Who should be the ones pointing the way forward?
I love all those organizations. And I've already said that, my experts, and therefore I think that the federal government's doing a good job. The problem is we need leaders with vision. And that's the problem. And that's why I'm going to write this book about Canada's energy future, is because you need, Maren Smith at Clean Energy Canada, love her, she's great. But Marin isn't going to get up on a podium and sell a hope and optimism message around the clean energy future, the electric future, and get everybody all excited and get them on board and start that ball rolling. We have nobody like that. You can look around the Canadian landscape, and if you can point to one person who would be that kind of leader, never mind 6, never mind a dozen, you can't point to one, then that's one of the reasons why we're kind of, at loggerheads and nobody can agree on anything. And we have endless meetings, to discuss this kind of thing, when what we need is some really clear leadership around our options. Now, I'll give you an example. Seth Klein, who many of you will probably know from, he's Naomi's brother, and he's a climate activist, and he wrote a book about using the World War II command and control model to fight climate change, right? So a lot of what we're talking about fits very well into this. So he says the federal government should just get in and either do it or direct industry to do it.
Lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Yeah, and you can listen to the Seth and I argue about it in the podcast. We had 40 minutes where we went back and forth in this because I don't agree with them. But that is a vision that's very, very clear. The options are very, very clear how we should proceed. It's just too far out on the fringes to appeal to mainstream Canadians, and it's not going to get any real traction. But we need that kind of clarity and the ability to sell a clear message at the national level and the provincial provincial level, many provincial levels, and we don't have it. And I think that's our biggest problem.
Yeah, even Aaron O'Toole is having a hard time convincing his party that the conversation should happen at all. And good on him for trying. Okay, I'm going to do this as the last question. It's from Jerry. How is it that politicians are talking about the green hydrogen economy as part of the solution when it is either a greenhouse effect gas generator or an electrical energy hog? Maybe not just green hydrogen writ large. Why are the politicians so keen on pushing this? Is it really just about keeping Alberta happy?
No, hydrogen is getting a lot of attention globally. I mean, the EU just came out with their hydrogen strategy. Canada just signed an agreement with Germany around developing hydrogen resources. The Americans, like I was mentioned, the example in California where they're talking about using surplus solar to generate hydrogen. But there's all sorts of wrinkles. So I interviewed and again, you can find this interview on our YouTube channel in the last couple of weeks. Excuse me. I interviewed an engineer in Alex Holland is his name, and he had written a report. He's based in the UK, and he said, "Well, that sounds really good, except electrolyzers aren't designed to do that. They don't ramp up and down like that. So you can't run them for 10 hours, shut them off, and then when the sun shines again, when you got cheap solar again, and then bring them back online." He said that's a huge technical challenge to make those work properly. And we probably won't have a solution to it for 10 years or maybe 15 years. So a lot of work has to go into that. So I don't know the answers to the specific question, about, but the reason why they like hydrogen is because I've interviewed experts who said, look, we can 2/3 of the economy we can electrify. That's no problem. Light duty vehicles, heat pumps, some industry and commercial buildings, all that kind of stuff. That technology, we got it nailed, right? It's the hard stuff. It's steel making. It's long haul transportation, long haul freight hauling, that kind of stuff. That's 1/3 of the economy is going to be really, really hard to decarbonize. And because hydrogen has zero emissions when it's used, that's a very attractive fuel, and you can make it out of natural gas and store the carbon dioxide underground, which is what Alberta wants to do. Or in 10 years, the estimate is that's when green hydrogen will be competitive. Now, is that all going to pan out? there's technical challenges, and maybe we're going to throw enough money at the technical challenges like we did with batteries that we overcome them. But I mean, time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, if you do look at the money that is going like towards battery electrification of everything, and what's going to hydrogen, what would you say the percentage is globally?
Oh, I have no idea, but my impression is that what's going into batteries and electrification is much, much, much higher than into hydrogen. I think hydrogen's at a earlier stage than batteries and EVs. So
yeah, which is ironic since we've been really working hard on it since the 60s.
Physics, not so hard.
That's the problem, the damn physics. Well, thank you, Markham. I think this has been awesome. We've kept you hard at it for a long time here.
Well, look, Glenn, my wife was just at the door saying that she was so happy that you kept me out of her hair for an hour. So thank you.
Isn't this Costco Day?
No, that was Thursday.
Okay. Well, thank you, Markham.
Thanks very much for having me, Glenn.
Yeah,
and appreciate it.
And you can pop on anytime to our calls here. You can creep in. In fact, you might want to be here for April 3rd. We're going to be looking at Class 8 vehicles. What's going to replace diesel?
Ooh, that is interesting.
Tasty.
And to that, I'm going to turn it over to El Presidente.
Well, thanks, guys. I'm going to run. I actually have some work to get done, so I'll catch you later.
Markham, thank you so much. Many comments coming in. Thanking you for your great presentation and time.
Take care.
Peace out, brother.
I should read some of those before I leave.
That was our guest today, Markham Hislop from Parksville, British Columbia. That's remarkable.
Yeah, he's had Tony Seabill on a number of times. Yeah, and the stuff, his older stuff where he's trying to talk to people in the hydrocarbon industry in Alberta is almost comical from the standpoint of the answers they're giving to him when he's giving them pretty tough questions. How do you see your future? So yeah, no,
we are an EV club, but I guess at the base of it is this transition to electric power. And I know for myself, we have solar panels now, and our hydro bill last year was $1,018. That's all in taxes and everything for the house, 3 adults, plus all of our driving 2 electric cars. So to be able to produce it yourself, this little utility in the backyard, it's a really good feeling. And I think the change is afoot for sure.
Yeah, I can talk briefly about solar.
Well, I think Bruce has got his hand up there too, Glenn. So if you want to...
this is just going to be a real quick minute here.
Get Bruce in there first quick.
Yeah, it was really well done presentation. I think that resonated the most with me was the comment that he made about the electrical producers starting to realize that their major customers are going to be producing their own hydro. And I think that's a huge change for things like BC Hydro and all of these other electrical producers that are just starting to come to the realization that their major customers, the customers that really keep them going, not the you and I small customers, but the major customers that keep them going, are going to start producing their own power. And that's fantastic. That's amazing. The other brief thing just to mention is the BCUC website has posted the BC Hydro rate structure for the cost of putting energy into your electric car at the BC Hydro stations. And I heard yesterday that's probably going to go live on May 1st. So after May 1st, any BC Hydro stations that you're not currently paying for are probably going to be 12 cents a kilowatt for the 25 kilowatt stations, or sorry, 12 cents a minute. They can't do kilowatt energy yet. 21 cents a minute for the 50 kilowatt stations. And if there's any 100 kilowatt stations, and I think there's one in the province, that'll be 27 cents a minute. And that's all I got to say.
Thanks, Bruce. That's awesome. Glenn, you're gonna give us a little insight into a new update. First day of spring.
So my system was finished yesterday. It's not quite commissioned yet. I've got 16 445 watt panels up on my townhome And apparently I'm the first guy in Victoria to be an owner with his own array on his roof, as opposed to being, a strata-owned system. So the good people down at Shift Energy did all that. So that looks pretty awesome. If the calculations work out right, that'll essentially take my home off of BC Hydro's hands, including driving the car.
There's a customer producing their own juice.
Yeah, and it's
Pure and simple.
distributed. Yeah, and in fact, I'll have more photos when we talk about this another time. But I also had built into it a sub panel, so the grid goes down, and I've got a battery backup. I have a sub panel that will be fed by the battery in the system to all my essential things in the house. Yeah, so now I just have to wait for, battery storage prices to come down to where I'm willing to accept it. But essentially, I've capped my energy costs for the next 30 years at 7 cents a kilowatt.
That's awesome. And you're not just affecting BC Hydro, but you're also cutting into Petrocan and Shell Oil's sales by switching to an EV, of course. We're all doing that, hopefully, as we go.
Yeah, I got rid of my hybrid second car that we had in the family. That went last week to somebody who's driving a pure gas car, so it's continuing doing its business. So we just have the EV and my guilty pleasure, my motorcycle. Sorry.
Hey, Glenn,
There are electric motorcycles, Glenn.
Yeah, they're coming.
Yeah, not for big boys.
Glenn, what battery system are you using?
I don't have the battery system yet, but I have the system all set up to do it. So when I drop the battery into the home, the panel that it needs to hook into and all the wiring is all there. So all that's been done. I forget the electricians in once, and then you're done. You can go in and get a Tesla Powerwall now. I think, a company will charge you 20 grand to have one installed, not to have it, to buy it and have it installed. That's a bit steep. And I think Tesla probably will in the next year. I'd say the outside a year. I predict, put on my Swami hat from Johnny Carson. I predict probably in a year, Tesla will turn around and say, we're no longer going to put valuable ion batteries into home storage, because that's a waste of a high performance battery that should be in the car. And I think you'll probably see them going into lithium iron phosphate batteries for home. My prediction.
Right on. Do you have a question here? Do you have a south-facing roof?
I have actually, my roof is, what do they call it now? A dumb name for a roof in a rainy place. A West Coast roof, which means it's flat except on the, it's flat, and then one edge on the southern part for my den rises up, and one part above my master bedroom rises up. So I've got arrays on both of those and arrays in the center as well. And so it's flat. I'm in a block of a block of four. There are 2 blocks of 4, but the whole street runs directly east-west. My ambition over the next decade is to have all my neighbors go solar, and we turn into our own microgrid, 1 megawatt or 2 megawatt battery set up between the homes, so that when the grid goes down, we go, what? Is there a power outage? Huh? What? Huh?
Yes, there is a movement afoot to install community solar plants where individuals invest and they build a solar farm on a spare piece of land. I'm not sure how well that happens here. I know in Royal Bay, there seems to be a really big steep slope. Very, very, very perfect for that very application. And so far, the developer is not interested, but if enough of us talk about it.
Yeah. I wanted to answer a question that Bill had. I think it was Bill. So for my system, all installed, about $2.33 a watt, which is significantly less than it was just a few years ago. And I think David will confirm this. Years ago, every panel $1,000, and it produced 250 watts or something. And now the panel is still $1,000, but now it's producing 455 watts. Probably in 5 years, it'll still be $1,000, but it's be producing 750 watts. So
Yeah, mine was more like $3, $2.85 a watt just a year and a half ago.
285?
Yeah, the power rating is lower. They're 385 watt panels, which at that time I waited a month to do my install, so the shipment of the brand new panels came in at the higher rating. So it's interesting. Plus, I'm a ground mount, so actually I paid another $4,500 on top of that. But I'm based on what it would have cost if I had put it on a roof.
Yeah.
So much closer to $3 a watt. And you're saying you're at 233?
233.
So that's 70 cents per watt drop in a year and a half. A little over a year and a half.
Yep. So anybody out there who did the Gazintas a couple years ago and said, "Oh, I can't do this," do it.
If you got money sitting in a GIC, it's a better investment. That's my undeclared advice, but that's what I tell everybody. That's that's part of the reason I did it. Put my money where I can make some money with it, tax free.
I turned around in my last home I owned, a mid-century home, and I spent 20 grand, dropped 20 grand just taking the kitchen back to the studs and rebuilding it. And, if I had sold within 5 years of that, I would have 75% of that back. Solar, you buy it. It has a definite date where you've made back all the money you would have anyway. And then after that, it starts paying you.
Yeah, and I was just talking to a member, sorry.
Yeah, it financially, it's truly a no-brainer. If you got a roof that can do it, do it.
And it was Shift Energy did Glenn's job, and we're talking about Shift right now because I also got a call from a member last night. He was on one of our calls a month or two ago, and he wanted some consumer or customer input on my experience with my solar panel system, because he has an EV and he wants to develop his own energy as well. So he's putting I think it's 15 panels fit on his roof as we speak almost. So he's over in Saanich.
Yeah.
And yes, they go to the Mid-Island. There's people up in the Mid-Island. We have different companies. There's HES Solar in Victoria. There's Viridian, which is kind of a collective of different installers all around BC, as far as I know. And I think there's more companies. Point to Power? No, there's a name. They're on one of the islands.
Power to the people.
Power to the people. Thank you. And the reason I went with Shift was simply that the year and a half ago when I was investigating, they were all so busy. Shift was literally the one that was able to get back to me right away. And the others were, two of them actually told me they were booked 3-4 months ahead and they didn't feel confident. So I wanted it done. So, and it turned out they were competent. High Tide Energy is another mention here on the chat. People want to take a look. People are throwing up some names. The life expectancy on my solar panels is the mechanical life is supposedly 25 years. The good news about that is that after 20 years or 25 years, if you need to replace them, their efficiency will start to drop a bit, apparently.
Yeah, 1% per year.
You can simply unclip them and stick on new ones, which by then presumably be much cheaper and even more efficient, because the cost of installing the infrastructure from your panel to the roof and the rails on your roof is a good part of the cost.
Yeah, I'll say one other thing. I started my road to going to solar, and I'm in a strata. People haven't figured that out. I'm in a strata. I started this back last June. I sent out a feeler email to a lot of companies. And as soon as they found out I was in a strata, they weren't talking to me. And had two companies actually gave me bids and shift bid because they're very mission oriented about getting things better, making, what our whole motto is, helping accelerate the change to a sustainable energy future. They're all about that. So they hung in with me, but we didn't have any hope that it was actually going to be able to be pulled off. But I kind of did the Chinese water torture of data and insistence, and 8 months later, it pays off. So it can be done.
Well, congratulations on your new. You're going to go home and stare at your little gauge
Well
that
done,
shows
Glenn.
how much you're producing.
Thanks.
Maybe is there anything else you want to add, Glenn? I was thinking we can move on to chat about the count event a little bit, just because we are a car club. Jerry.
Yeah, just want to add a little comment, and it's something that I would have loved to have a discussion with Markham about. But when he was talking about no conversation happening with BC Hydro and their model, and one of the things that you mentioned, Glenn, that you currently can't financially justify putting in batteries. One of the things that the government of British Columbia should consider doing, and it's their job, BC Hydro can't do it. The government is the one who writes the charter for BC Hydro, so they're the ones who can change, is to allow cogeneration. So that when you're making more electricity on a nice hot sunny day that you can possibly consume, it goes into the grid. So it's money in your pocket. And then one cold night when you need more power, you can draw back from the grid. Now that means that in the cogeneration model, you buy and sell at the same rate. And I know that right now there's issues with the way BC Hydro looks at it. We had that conversation a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, the BC Hydro will only pay your excess at the end of the year at the mid-Columbia rate, which currently is just under 4 cents a kilowatt.
But Jerry,
Yeah, but
Glenn, I know you're going to be finding this out. That's exactly what they're doing right now. We've got 34 panels. All our surplus during the summer goes to our battery backup, BC Hydro, and we draw it back at the equivalent rate. So if we were to pay for it, it'd be 10 cents. When it comes back to it, it's as if they're giving us 10 cents. They're just giving us a kilowatt hour. It's only your surplus that they, in their wisdom, has dropped it from 10 cents to 4 cents. Only the surplus. But what you're talking about, Jerry, is exactly what is happening right now when you use BC Hydro as your battery backup. You put it in, and then whatever you have as accumulated in the wintertime, when you obviously aren't producing enough, you just simply draw it back at equal amount. You put it in, it comes back to you. And when you get back down to zero, then I guess you have to start paying them because you're still on the grid.
We haven't paid anything for hydro for over a year, and the solar panels run our house and our car.
And the other thing that annoys me about BC Hydro is that they are the regulator. And I'll point out, I was going to mention this, but you're mentioning shift, and that sounds like everybody's very happy with the work that they do. Steve Unger from Viridian, who we relied on, has just moved from Viridian to Shift. So it only makes the company that much better, I'm sure. But the fact that when they give you an estimate on how much power you use and then determine how many panels would provide that for you and so forth and so on, then they have to go to BC Hydro to get approval to put that many panels. They don't want you putting surplus panels. Back in the day when people saw it as a way of making money, there are those that are grandfathered, like for example, the South Nation that have an enormous array. If they were to turn around and say, oh no, we're changing the contract, you only get 4 cents now, there would be hell to pay. So certain have been grandfathered. we know one local person here who put on 40 on his roof, which is far more than what he needed. And his only anger was the fact he only got paid once a year instead of once a month, or once every 2 months, which is the way BC Hydro bills us. And I'm sure he's just seething that 10 cents became 4 cents just because BC Hydro can do that.
Yeah. And
It
our
wasn't BC
champion,
Hydro, that was a decision made by the BCUC. And they brought that in using that as a trade-off. BC Hydro didn't want to pay anything for it.
yeah, that's true. And it was our sister organization. I call them sister organization because they're kind of doing the same thing we are. BC Sustainable Energy. They're the ones who stood before the BC Utility Commission and said, hey, BC Hydro, when you get energy from Washington State, you pay them for it. Here you're getting energy from people generating in BC. You need to pay something for that. And they said the bare minimum is going to be the mid-Columbia rate that you're paying for out of province. So that's exactly what BC Hydro did. But that was another organization like us who is standing up for people.
Can I say a word?
Oh.
I had an expert on hydroeconomics give me an estimate last week over the cost of Site C. And Site C, what they call the levelized cost, is going to be cost of production for Site C, with all the interest and whatnot cost in it, is going to be 17.4 cents per kilowatt hour is his estimate. So that's like right in our whole grid now, I think is around 3 or 4 cents, something like that. So that's going to be a massive, massive hit on hydro.
Over how long a time frame is that? That's over 100 years?
I have a feeling it is, but I'm not positive.
I don't think so. I'm getting into arguments with people on Twitter about this. They're not using the 100-year model on this. They're using like 20 or 30 years. If all the dams, the 10 or 5 or 10 cents that we're paying now is a cost that was amortized over 100 years. These dams were built 50 to 100 years ago. So I hate all this negative stuff on Site C. We really need Site C. Build Site C. Sorry, that's my rant.
Well, that's great, Stefan.
Closer to 100. I think it was either 70 years or 100 years that he used.
Yeah, the number I keep on hearing is 70, but you're right. We don't know what people are necessarily using, but we've yet to get to the end of what the actual cost is. Interestingly, if you took half of BC's, half of all BC's single-family homes, 450,000, gave them a $20,000 grant to put up enough electricity to take them off the grid, that would cost us $9 billion. And that would make far more energy than Site C.
Yeah, but hydro is completely on demand. The house stuff is not on demand. It's not, you can't rate it the same.
Hydro becomes your battery.
No, batteries are only good for 6 to 12 hours right now. I mean, a dam can store up, all of the spring's rainwater and can roll it out over 3 months.
Well, I tell you what, this sounds like it's going to be a really good topic for maybe a presentation sometime, Stefan, if you're interested.
I need to do some more research on this. It's getting me worked up and I don't have enough information, but yeah, maybe in a couple of months I can come up with something. Thanks.
No, we'd appreciate it. And good luck trying to find data on BC Hydro, because I'll tell you, it's tough.
Yeah, that seems to be a big problem. There really is no good numbers.
Yeah.
One number that the guy who just presented, Markham, noted, what did he say? It was the debt equity ratio was 82-18. And I know that right now, they have about $22 to $24 billion worth of debt. And that doesn't include anything for Site C. It should include the dam up that they just rebuilt up in, Campbell River, and the other capital expenditures that they've made. But this adding 16 billion into 24 is a massive, massive hit to the utility, no matter how far off you run it.
Yeah, well, that's the other argument is that over the past 20 or 30 years, the hydro rates have not been going up enough, that maybe we should be paying more like 15 cents a kilowatt hour. And in 20 years with inflation, it'll be close to 20, 25. So, you know, probably BC Hydro has been accumulating debt at the expense of keeping rates artificially low, when the run rate for maintaining all the dams that they have is actually, you know, been higher than what they're charging. Washington State is having this issue. There's a big article in the Seattle Times about how the U.S. federal government, you know, Cooley Dam and all that stuff, they neglected maintenance on those dams for 20 or 30 years. And so the rates that they were charging were way, way too low. So I think this is a problem with all of the large dam operators over the past 50 years. They haven't really been managing them well for, you know, long-term maintenance and future investments, things like that.
That's in part what our BC Utility Commission is supposed to take into consideration in setting the rates, because BC Hydro makes a request for rate and then the commission comes back and tells them what it shall be. It's also the reason the Campbell government didn't go to them to get approval and change the legislation, so they didn't have to go to the BCUC to get approval to build the dam in the first place, because they knew it wasn't economic.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's a political hot potato. Nobody wants to pay more for electrical rates, and in a way, the government kind of running the utility, there's kind of a conflict of interest there, right? Because they're willing to bury the numbers in order to keep people happy.
Yeah, this will be a great conversation at another day. Let's cap it at that.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Thank you, guys.
No, this is good stuff.
Yeah.
We, like I said, we're into this. We're into this stuff, man.
Right. Actually, one of the quick thing I just wanted to mention on that is that also BC Hydro's artificially low rates is what's keeping wind and solar from coming into this province. That's the other issue, right? With arts rates being artificially low. So that's just one more thing you could add into that discussion. So that's it. That's
true statement.
Yeah. Thanks.
David.
I was just going to say that it's good that we're looking towards having the conversation, but when the rates go that high, I'll be looking to putting in Tesla power walls and vertical shaft wind turbines, 6 of them on my roof.
Yeah, I was going to say something to that effect. Drive past the gas pump, and I'm glad I drive electric. I get home and plug in. I'm glad I have solar. It works in my favor at every step. And so that drives the home install. We all trying to lower our carbon footprint. I just read UK's down, what is it, 35%? Germany's down 28% in the last 10 years or something. Carbon, I don't know where those numbers came from. I just read them today, and I think it was a Globe and Mail article, but anyway. Sounds like we're heading in the right direction to some degree, but it's a very huge and complex subject. Just trying to get a handle on what EVs are available, what issues there are with them for the owner to deal with, if any, and well, there are, and what they are. Trying to choose what to buy, what color to choose. This is a challenge. I've sort of alluded to this in the past. The biggest challenge is picking a color. Just wait until they perfect their paint shop down there in Berlin or wherever, that new paint shop, Austin, where they have this fancy new paint shop where they can do these colors that change depending on the angle you look at for a reasonable price, and everybody's got them. Meanwhile, if the vehicles are driving in from Souk, I'm down at the Colwood Corners on the 24th. I'm just wondering how I'm going to be differentiate between a Kona gas and a Kona electric when the cars are whizzing past. We have our signs made that say, honk if you drive an EV. So we need spotters. I got Jim and Jonesy coming to join me, I hope. I don't see them here today yet. Are they here? I could use 1 or 2 volunteers. I don't know if Jim's got them on a list at that corner. It's a fairly busy corner. Terry.
Yeah, to answer your question about how to differentiate the Kona electric and the gas.
At speed while the traffic is whizzing by.
If you don't see the front. So the first clue to look for is the antenna on the roof. If you've got the little
knob.
fin on the back, it's definitely an electric one. Also, that's a little more difficult, but they don't have quite the same, you know, the wraparound black around the wheel wells in the front. It's distinct from the nose of the car for the electrics. So, you know, it's touch and go.
Isn't the grill quite different too? I thought the grill on the electric was all plastic with a few little holes in it, whereas the gas one has an open grill. Is that not?
Yeah, there's no grill on the electric. It's a body color front. So you can clearly, if you see the nose, you can clearly tell it's electric.
So the trick is to count them while they're still coming at you. Don't wait till they've passed. Oh, you can tell by the smile on the driver. I like that there. That's a good clue.
Yeah.
David, if you're looking for volunteers, we'll certainly be there.
Or are you going to be at Collie Corner?
Sure. We
cool.
hadn't said where we were, but if you need some help, that's
Oh,
where we'll be.
well, that'd be perfect. And that's closest to you, I guess, coming in.
Absolutely. And we'll know all the soup drivers going by.
You'll be there at 6:15, 6:20. Get set up. Come on, Carol, you can do it. David will drive. You can sleep on the way in.
Yeah.
6:15, 6:20.
Bring in the choir bus from Souk, the double decker, the top layer of that 6 o'clock bus. They are always singing. It's the choir bus. I've been told by commuters from Souk.
Jonesy and I are coming too.
Yeah, there, Jim. Is that you? There you are, Jim. Yeah, I thought you were. Yeah, I was just hoping that maybe the three of us might. Maybe it's a big intersection. I was thinking because it's busy in the morning both ways. There's kind of a rush hour heading out as well as up to Machosin and at that time of day or through that morning rush hour. So I was thinking 2 on one side, 2 on the other, and I'll dangle in the middle somehow.
We'll get him.
Nanaimo. Oh, Nanaimo. Larry from Nanaimo is talking about any volunteers who are interested in helping out there. If you'd like to do that, be great. Yeah. Do we contact you, Larry, if somebody's at your mid?
Yep, please.
Okay, that's the Mid-Island EVA.
Yep.
So anybody can help out those folks, that'd be great. How many points, how many intersections do you have lined up?
We have 2. One major one at the Parkway and Mostar Jingle Pot, which there's a lot of traffic turning in and out of there, and from the north end of Nanaimo, and then also at the Nanoose Petrocam.
Cool. That's
why not have an EV count at a gas station, right?
Yeah, that's right. Perfect. With a big sign, honk if you're, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've already got a, sorry, go ahead.
Just there's someone on this user. Hi, sorry. Do you want to talk to Larry or send a note to Larry? You got a volunteer there. Okay.